Now when you're purchasing rings, in order to make mounting a whole lot easier, I recommend ones that have at least 4 screws on top. The reason is that in the process of leveling this thing, as you tighten them down to get everything leveled and set to the proper torque, as you tighten this one down on the front, it'll unadjust things on the back. After you get everything adjusted, lined, and leveled, then what you do with everything set to the proper torque, everything's aligned, centered, leveled, and at the proper torque. Now you want to add Loctite, because if you add Loctite too early, then it's going to be hard to adjust those bolts, and if you have to repeatedly loosen them, or if it dries before you're finished adjusting them, then those final adjustments are actually going to undo the benefits of the Loctite, and the Loctite's not going to function as well in the future. So I recommend ones that have 4, so once you get everything set in there, you can actually take screws out one at a time without anything affecting, because you still have the front rings holding everything in place and 3 other screws holding everything in place. Take one screw out, Loctite it, tighten it back down to torque, and then do that one screw at a time all the way around. What I actually like to do is, since this one has something that protrudes, I put this on the opposite side so that the process of working the bolt or working the action on the rifle, this does not get in the way and doesn't ding up my finger. Also, it's one less thing for brass to catch on as it's ejecting from the rifle to help prevent failures. I like to dry fit everything, so I'll actually put everything on here first and lock it down just finger tight. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that the scope is going to set in here, because you notice there's 2 positions on the scope base. Some of them have even more. This one in particular has 2. So if you get it all in one position and then put your scope on there, you notice the bell shape on the front of the scope, or the bevel on the rear of the scope, and the center here, when that scope's in there, as you're adjusting for eye relief, you want that to be able to slide back and forth and clear all of those parts. If you have this set too far forward and you need to slide the scope back, you'll only be able to slide it back so far. So make everything finger tight, do a dry fit, and then reassemble everything. What I like to do is a dry fit with the scope and actually have the shooter get behind the rifle to adjust the eye relief, mark the scope with tape so I know where it needs to line up later, and then disassemble everything, do my lapping and lining, and then using those tape marks on the scope, reassemble everything. Okay, with the bases removed, with the top half of the rings removed, I'm going to do a dry fit. There's perfect examples here of why. Put that on there, front sight's going to get in the way. Now you don't have to remove the front sight even if it doesn't get in the way, because that sets close enough to the front of the scope that you're not going to see that when you're looking through the scope. I have plenty of adjustability here, so I don't think I need to move anything as far as my rings are concerned, or my bases are concerned. What I might do is, just to make sure I have enough rearward adjustment, I'm going to move this back one more slot, and I'm going to take this front sight post off. Just in case it's needed, I'll show that. There's a little nut on the side of that. Usually it's an Allen key. Just loosen that. Loosen that a couple of turns if you need to, and then this will slide off. As you can see, this kind of pinches on there, so that's not going to slide real easy. A couple ways around that is you can use a small screwdriver to open that gap. You can just muscle a little bit, or use my fancy handy toolkit and a small block of wood just to protect the finish on everything, and just tap it out. As you can see, it doesn't take much to tap it out. And now that is out of your way. Now when I mount the ring bases, or the ring bottoms to the scope base, push them all the way forward against the front of the scope base and tighten them down from there. Okay, to set eye relief, you want to put the scope in the rings and slide the scope back and forth until you have good eye relief. How you're going to know good eye relief is by the field of view through the scope. If you look through the scope right now, you can see there's a full circle. You can see the entire reticle, the entire inside of the scope. As you slide that back and forth inside the scope rings, you'll see that that starts to black out around the edges. If it's too far forward or if it's too far back. There's a window here where you usually have about 2 inches of play where you can move forward or backwards and still keep that field of view. What you want to do is set it in there so that that field of view is nice and clean and you don't have that blackout around the edges in either direction. The other thing you're going to want to do at this point, what I like to do is you're going to want to mark your rings, the top half of your rings. While you're lapping and aligning this, these are going to come off probably several times because every once in a while you're going to want to check how your lapping is going. What you're going to have to know is which of these is in front, which of these is in back, and which direction they're facing so that you don't spend 10 minutes lapping, take them apart, and then put them back together wrong, and now you have to keep lapping beyond what you otherwise should have. If you overlap these, then you don't get enough grip. The diameter opens up too much and they won't grip the scope. What I do is I just use 2 pieces of electrical tape and I cut triangles in them to show what direction they're facing. The triangle acts like an arrow to show me the front of that particular ring. Make sure that they don't cover up the holes for your screws. And then I will actually put 2 triangles on the ring in front and 1 triangle on the ring in back. You can use whatever you want, mark them however you want. Just make sure you remember which one's in the front of the scope, which one's in the back of the scope, and what direction they're facing. So that in the process of doing your lapping and aligning, when you take it apart to check it and put it back together between checks, it goes back together the same way each time. Okay, couldn't get my daughter to cooperate and appear on video for this to show you how to actually adjust this to their field of view, but basically have them sit behind the rifle in the position they're going to shoot it from, slide the scope forward and backward in the rings until they have the clear field of view, and then stop. Once you have it set where it's going to be for their field of view, a couple of pieces of regular masking tape. I use masking tape because it doesn't stick really well to the metal, so it's not going to mar the finish on the metal. Any place that I can get tape on both sides, I will tape both sides, which just makes it easier to put it back in the same exact spot later. And now your scope is marked so that after you get all the lapping done, you put your scope back in the same spot. Once you've gotten this far, these 2 screws can now be taken out one at a time and Loctited in position. Now these 2 screws, go ahead and pull these out. Just remember which slot you've got it on. You don't have to pull that little screw, you don't have to pull that all the way out of here. Just pull it out far enough that you can get Loctite to engage those threads as you tighten it back down. Put a little bit of Loctite on the threads, just like that. Put it back in position where you want it. Push it forward towards the front of the scope base. Hand tighten it. And then again with the Wheeler inch pound. Winded screws are supposed to be set between 30 and 40 inch pounds. These are cheap aluminum rings, not steel rings, so I'm going to set them at right at 30, especially since it's on a 22. Just turn that till it clicks, and do the other side. And that are going to be actually inside the, and tighten it and crank it down with